I never thought much about ghost towns until I visited one. Growing up in the Midwest, I'd heard stories about abandoned mining towns in Nevada, places where time stood still, and spirits allegedly wandered. It was all just folklore to me, harmless tales to entertain on road trips. But after what I experienced last summer, I'll never dismiss those stories again. It started with a spontaneous road trip. My buddy Ethan and I were driving from Colorado to California, taking the scenic route through Nevada. Somewhere along Route 50, the so-called loneliest road in America, we came across a sign that read, Gold Creek, 12 miles. Ethan, ever the adventurer, immediately suggested we check it out. Come on, he grinned, leaning over the steering wheel. When's the last time you explored an abandoned town? I wasn't thrilled about the idea. The sun was already starting to set, and the thought of poking around dilapidated buildings in the middle of nowhere didn't appeal to me. But Ethan was persistent, and admittedly, curiosity got the better of me. The road to Gold Creek was a winding dirt path, flanked by endless stretches of dry desert. The radio signal had long since faded, leaving us in an eerie silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under the tires. By the time we reached the town, the sun was little more than a sliver on the horizon. Gold Creek was like a snapshot from the past. A handful of crumbling wooden buildings lined a single dusty street, their windows shattered and their roofs caved in. Rusted mining equipment lay scattered like forgotten toys, and a sagging sign reading, "Welcome to Gold Creek," swung lazily in the wind. "This is so cool," Ethan said, grabbing his flashlight and hopping out of the car. I reluctantly followed, clutching my jacket as a chill crept into the air. The atmosphere was unsettling. The silence was absolute, no birds, no insects, nothing. Even the wind seemed hesitant, brushing softly against the brittle remains of the town. As we walked, the wooden planks beneath our feet groaned, their protests echoing in the stillness. Ethan, oblivious to the unease settling over me, started exploring one of the larger buildings. It looked like it might have been a saloon once, judging by the long counter and the remains of a piano in the corner. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he wandered deeper inside. I stayed near the entrance, keeping an eye on the fading light outside. The last thing I wanted was to be stuck here after dark. "Hey, check this out," Ethan called from somewhere in the back. His voice sounded distant, muffled. "What is it?" I asked, stepping cautiously over the rotting floorboards. Before he could answer, a noise cut through the air. A sharp, high-pitched wail, like the cry of an animal, but wrong. It was too drawn out, too human. My stomach knotted as the sound faded into an eerie silence. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan popped his head around the corner, his expression half amused, half annoyed. "Relax, dude, probably just a coyote." I wasn't so sure. Coyotes didn't sound like that. But I didn't want to look like a coward, so I shrugged it off and followed Ethan out of the saloon. The sun had fully set now, and the desert was bathed in a pale, ghostly glow from the rising moon. We decided to check out the church next. It was a small, whitewashed building with peeling paint and a lopsided steeple. The front door hung crooked on its hinges, creaking as we pushed it open. Inside, rows of pews sat covered in a thick layer of dust, and a cracked pulpit stood at the front. Ethan started poking around near the pulpit while I stayed near the door, my unease growing with every passing second. That's when I saw it, a shadow flickering just outside the window. My heart leapt into my throat as I froze, straining to see through the dirty glass. There was nothing there, just the empty street, bathed in moonlight. "Did you see something?" Ethan asked, noticing my stiff posture. "Thought I did," I muttered, not wanting to sound paranoid. We left the church shortly after, deciding it was time to head back to the car. But as we stepped outside, a wave of dread washed over me. The town felt different. The air was heavier, the shadows darker. And then we heard it again, that same wailing cry, closer this time. Ethan's flashlight swept across the street, illuminating the empty windows of the buildings. "All right, I'll admit, that's creepy," he said, his bravado finally cracking. We quickened our pace, but as we neared the car, a figure stepped into the road ahead of us. At first, I thought it was a person. It stood on two legs, tall and thin, with an almost human shape. But something about it was off, the way it moved, jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. My flashlight caught its face, and my stomach turned. It wasn't a face at all, just a blank expanse of pale, leathery skin stretched taut over a skull. Its mouth was too wide, filled with jagged teeth that glinted in the light. And its eyes, if you could call them that, were black pits, empty and endless. Ethan and I froze, too terrified to move. The creature tilted its head, studying us with an almost curious expression. Then, without warning, it let out a guttural growl and dropped to all fours, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. "Run," Ethan shouted, snapping me out of my paralysis. We bolted toward the car, our footsteps pounding against the ground. The creature let out a piercing screech and gave chase, its limbs propelling it forward with horrifying speed. I reached the car first, fumbling with the keys as my hands shook uncontrollably. Ethan was right behind me, screaming at me to hurry. Just as I managed to unlock the door, I felt a rush of air and heard a deafening thud. I turned to see Ethan on the ground, the creature looming over him. It had him pinned, its grotesque mouth inches from his face. Without thinking, I grabbed the flashlight and swung it as hard as I could, smashing it against the creature's head. It let out a blood-curdling scream and recoiled, giving me just enough time to pull Ethan to his feet. We dove into the car, slamming the doors and locking them as the creature hurled itself against the windows, its claws screeching against the glass. "Drive," Ethan shouted, his voice hoarse with terror. I didn't need to be told twice. I floored the gas pedal, and the car lurched forward, sending the creature sprawling to the ground. In the rearview mirror, I saw it rise, its black eyes glinting in the moonlight as it watched us speed away. We didn't stop driving until we reached the next town, our hearts still racing and our minds struggling to process what had happened. Ethan refused to talk about it afterward, brushing it off as just a crazy animal. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget the way that thing looked at us, like we were intruders, trespassing on its territory. I haven't been back to a ghost town since. And I never will. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like this video, leave a comment, and hit that subscribe button for more spine-tingling content.